The main feature of this museum for me was definitely King Tut's treasures. We weren't allowed to take pictures, you weren't allowed to bring your camera in at all, so I don't have any pictures, but I might steal some off the internet for you to show you. For the King Tut things, we started off with the outer box, which was gold with lots of turquoise on it as well. It was quite large, like the size of a really big bathroom, I guess. If that's a good comparison. Then the next box was a bit smaller than that, and it was all gold, but of course had tons and tons of writing all over it. Then there was another gold box that was even smaller than that one, followed by another, then followed by a granite one. After that, there's a wooden mummy case, and it is inlaid with gold. After that, there's a mummy case, and it has gold leaf all over it. After that, there's another mummy case, and it has gold leaves as well as precious stones. Finally, the third mummy case is made of solid gold and weighs 220 pounds. Then finally within that is the actual mummy, and it's wrapped in lots and lots of linen, but on top of the mummy there's that beautiful mask that everyone knows as King Tut's mask, as well as necklaces and jewelry, gold belts, and then within that, of course, is the dry, dirty, crusty mummy. However, the belly was emptied of all its organs, like we know, and filled with jewels, which I didn't know, and that I found interesting. There's a special room for things that were found inside of the sarcophagi, and the mask blew my mind. I've seen so many pictures of it, and to see it in real life was just so exciting. It was amazing. The beautiful, highly polished gold inlay with the precious stones, and underneath it looked like the necklaces that you see, and each side had the protective gods on it, and on top it had the snake and the vulture, and the detail in the snake, all of the scales, was amazing. Also, we got to see all of those boxes close up, all of the mummy case within the mummy case within the mummy case, and again, the detail in those was phenomenal. Sometimes it would have scales on it, and there would be 3 colored jewels within each of them. There'd be a black, red, and blue to make these almost peacock-like scales, but each of them were these tiny little things, but then there would be like 600 or 1,000 of them just on one section of the case of the mummy. It was phenomenal craftsmanship. The innermost one, the solid gold one that was so heavy, had amazing detail. Even where the feet were, the feathering on there, and even the detail in the Isis goddess. Her wings, her necklace, her dress. So much fine detail done in the gold. And even the writing, it was all gorgeous. It all blew my mind, and just, oh, I felt like a kid in a candy store. It was wonderful. Outside of there are all the treasures of Tutankhamen, and they take up halls upon halls upon halls. And it's crazy to me to think that Tutankhamen really was no one. Like, he wasn't a special ruler. He became pharaoh and then died at a very early age. He was crippled most of his life. He had tons of illnesses, and these are all the treasures we found. So imagine what the treasures would have been for Ramses II, or for anyone that was bigger than him. Imagine that they were still around. It would have been phenomenal to see them, and I'm sure it would have filled cities with the treasures that were there. So outside there were chariots and bows, arrows, staffs, chairs, and they were like a folding chair made of ebony and ivory, a wooden chair, a golden chair, and then there were beds. There was the golden bed, and then there was the sick child bed that had the child god to keep sicknesses away, which is the head of a lion and the body of a wolf. He also had his hunting and camping bed. It's just so many things, all for the afterlife. All of his, slaves for the afterlife in their tiny little forms. Just so many treasures in there. It was mind-blowing. Now, Tutankhamen was not the only exciting mummy there. There were tons of sarcophagi. I tried to count up, roughly, and I got to 190 before I ran out of time for counting. And they came in a various range. I mean, there were ones that were detailed with tiny designs all over them, and tons of color, and lots and lots of detail put in the face. And then there were other ones that were, mainly white, but still with like almost a feather pattern or a linen pattern, and then lots of detail around here. There were ones that were just kind of plain wood. Whether the paint has come off or whether they just weren't as detailed, I don't know. And we even saw one that, I guess it was just the mummy casing, and you could see like the toes poking out, the bones, and like the skull, but you could still see the wrapping all around it. It was so neat to see all the various styles and kinds, and the ones for the girls and the ones for the boys, and the outer casings and the inner casings, and there were just so many. I mean, at the museum in Toronto, there's like 2. There was over 190 easily. And there were also these gargantua ones, which the one that I saw was about 3 meters long. It was insane. Why you would need one to be so big, I'm not sure. Maybe just to make a statement or make up for something. But the idea of making all of these and preparing so much for the afterlife is astounding to me. We also saw the famous black dog that you always see in those pictures. It is a jackal, technically. Anubis, the protector of graves. And he has like this long tail, but he looks a lot like a Doberman. And it was so neat to see him because I've seen so many pictures from when originally they were discovered by Howard Carter. And just to be there in person was amazing. We also got to see the 3 embalming beds that Tutankhamen would have been embalmed on. The first one being the head of a lion. And it's a crying lion, and she's crying because she killed him. And that's where they would have dried out the body using salt. And this would have happened over 40 days. So that's the deathbed. Then he would have been moved to the hippo bed. And that is the goddess basically to protect against miscarriage. If women are worried about their child, they would, buy something or make something that had this goddess on it. And this is where they're hoping that he won't miscarriage. He will be born again into the afterlife with her help in a way. Her protection. Finally, there's the cow bed, and that's supposed to be that he is born again, that it will go through and there will be no miscarrying. And the cow god is sort of like his guardian angel throughout his life, both in the real world and in the afterlife. We got to see many pieces as well that were taken from tombs, the inside, to see all the hieroglyphics, but very few of them had any of the paint left on them. However, we did see these 2 statues that had all the paint on them, and they were beautiful, and they still had the eyes. Onyx was used for the pupil sometimes, rock crystal for the iris, and then ivory for the whites of your eyes. And it was unreal when he shone his little flashlight in their eyes. It's creepy how alive they look. And it was funny to see how much more tanned they had painted the king and how much more fair the queen was. And that was all that we got to see in that museum. I would have loved to have a couple of days, realistically, to go through that museum. Also, I wish that it was signed better. I'd go up to something and be like, ooh, what's this? Or whose is this? And either it would be all in Arabic or have nothing. And I just really? You have all these amazing things and you haven't cataloged them better? That's so sad. All these wonderful treasures and possible knowledge to be giving out to the tourists coming through here, and the time wasn't taken. Although some of them do have very nice descriptions, so that was good at least for the bigger pieces. But even if there was just a little description like, this is a canopic jar, or this is a game, or something, would be needed and nice and necessary, personally. Then we just headed back to the hotel, and we're off to eat dinner later on. And that was the first leg of our journey, seeing the Great Pyramids, seeing the Sphinx, and seeing the museum, which have been dreams of mine since I was in grade 4, and learned about the Egyptians, and made my first sarcophagus out of paper mache. So it's so exciting to finally be here, and I'm glad you guys are coming along for the journey. See you tomorrow.